And we're in. Welcome, welcome, and as I like to say, thrice welcome, hang the consequences to a very, very glorious halcyon day here in the Good Listening To Show Clearing, the show in which I invite movers, makers, shakers, mavericks, influencers, and also personal heroes into a clearing or serious happy place of my guests' choosing as they all share with us their stories of distinction and genius. And talking of stories of distinction and genius, I am absolutely privileged to have a world-renowned legend in the clearing, David L. Deutsch. He's a copywriting genius. He's been called the billion-dollar copywriter. You're called David L. Deutsch. My presumption, that could be L for legend, but it might be to differentiate you from a British Oxford University atomic and laser physicist. I don't know if you knew you shared the same name, David, as that physicist.
Yes, I like to say, what are the odds that two geniuses could have the same name? You know,
what are the odds indeed?
What are the odds of that? You know,
and one of your, if I may say, disciples of your copywriting mentorship scheme, Cassie Quinton, has been really, really helpful in introducing us, and I'm very delighted that she has, because it is really, really exciting, and you've created a bit of a buzz and a bit of a hum in the sort of hive mind of copywriters and writers that I know and have worked alongside. I do have a very lovely gentleman in Vietnam who's now sweating because he just assumes he's going to be out of a job because now I'm talking to the likes of David L. Deutsch. So for those of us that, well, I'm delighted to meet you, and I've really enjoyed researching you. If I may call you the copywriter's copywriter, you spent the last 4 decades making sure companies got copy, and I'd very much like you to unpack that for us. But if someone doesn't have a frame of reference for you, David L. Deutsch, would you like to just say how you most like to answer the question, hello, what do you do? What's your way, David, of describing the sort of silky skill and the art of copywriting that you've brought to bear?
You know, I guess the way to describe it is I help people get response in whatever that way they need to get a response, whether that's sending a letter to one person, you know, that $1 billion deal depends on, or whether that's writing an ad that goes to millions of people, or a sales letter that goes to, you know, millions of people, whether it's a post on social media. You know, we all want to get response. We all want to be responded to in one way or another. And I help people with, you know, the persuasion, like how do you persuade someone? How do you convince them it's in their best interest to respond? You know, what are the mechanisms that have proven effective for that? And how do you even think about that? Because I think a lot of copywriting is really thinking. It's not, oh, these words, and I got to do these words here in this order, but it's really just thinking about, what is their day like? What is that person like? And what do they care about? What keeps them up? And what are they going to respond to?
And then writing into their pain in how you actually persuade them.
Yes, exactly. First thinking into their pain, though.
Yes.
Right? Because I think people make the mistake of writing too quickly.
Yes.
Before they've really thought it out.
And you've cut your teeth on the very best. I know that you were with the father of advertising back in the day, David Ogilvy of Ogilvy in Mather. That's the acclaimed Madison Avenue advertising agency I think you first got going with.
Yes. And that was incredible to get started there, because it was kind of like a teaching hospital. You know, the teachings emanating from Ogilvy, and, you know, everybody was about learning, and, you know, you had his books and you had him. And I was lucky in that he was a very results-oriented advertising person. He wasn't into awards, right? He was into what moved the needle. He was into sales. And he loved direct response. And so when I eventually went into direct response, I was prepared for that.
And indeed, then the fruits of your love, labor, and attention to what you're doing, you're now called the billion dollar copywriter, which proves that you know what you're talking about. What are some of the campaigns you're most proud of in this extraordinary 40-year career?
You know, it's funny. A lot of the campaigns, you know, it was fun doing stuff for General Foods when I got to work with the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz, Margaret Hamilton. She was kind of the spokesperson for the advertising. And, you know, the things that I remember it's funny, are kind of the biggest challenges. Like one time I had to write a book for what's called estate planning, which means after you die, how do you make sure your money goes to the right people? How do you make sure that your heirs don't get taxed and all that? And it was just, not only was it the most boring subject in the world, it was the most depressing subject in the world, because who wants to think about, when they're gone? And the challenge of doing that and making it interesting, the bullets like how to avoid accidentally disinheriting your heirs, right? Turning boring stuff into stuff like that.
That's a very important question. We're already thinking that's hooked me. We're all interested.
Yeah.
What's the answer?
But it really taught me, how do you take something that's boring and just factual and turn it into interesting? Because I think that's what copywriting is. Right? It's making things interesting. It's making the old new. It's making the new familiar, and familiar is the old. And it's making things interesting that aren't inherently interesting.
And you're mentioning legacy was a brilliant segue into something at the very end that, as we know, we first connected when I talked to you about something called legacylifereflections.com, which is something I'm working on at the moment. And you were very generous in when I first got in touch with you. You gave me some copy ideas for it already, which I noticed was very instinctive of you.
Yeah, I remember that. And that's something I love to do. And you talk about what do I do or what do I love to do? It's that. Like it's looking at something and seeing what it needs and, where it needs to go. And just opening people's eyes to a different way of thinking about it.
And we'll come on to directing people to your speaking of writing. And well, you can describe it how you want, but it's your main frame of where you encourage people who want to be mentored in the art of writing to come along to, isn't it?
Yes, the speaking of writing.com website.
Yes. And I promise there's a very funky bit at the end called "Show us your QR code, please," and we'll point people very much to where they can come and find you, which is very exciting. Do you want to just say a little bit more about the epicentric thing of got copy? Because there's a sort of got milk attachment to that, which I really enjoyed researching. So I mentioned you've spent the last 4 decades making sure companies got copy. Why do you frame it in that way?
Well, I guess, part of it is just loving that old campaign. I don't know if it ran in the UK as well, but, they were having a problem with milk. Nobody was drinking milk anymore. And, this is also a great example of copy thinking. They're like, okay, what do we do? We have to tell people that it's got lots of vitamins. We have to tell people it's good for them and builds bodies 12 ways or, whatever it is. We have to tell them it's delicious. And instead, somebody did some thinking and said, well, why do people, drink milk? They drink milk because it goes with things, right? It goes with cookies, right? It goes, it goes with a peanut butter sandwich and, and the associations that it has. And so instead of highlighting how good it is to have milk in a way, they highlighted how bad it is not to have milk. And one of the best ones was somebody eating a, peanut butter sandwich and it's all sticky and it's in their mouth and they need some milk because, that'll get it unsticky and that's great to drink with peanut butter sandwich. And they don't got milk. Right. And it's the kind of the horror of that, which is, playful and funny, right? Because it's an exaggerated thing, but we all relate to it.
And then got copy then uses the same simplicity imperative to make sure we need the right copy to persuade, I'm assuming.
Right. What happens when you don't got copy? What happens when you don't have good copy? Right. Nothing happens really. People don't know about you. They don't buy from you.
Wonderful. So shall we get on the open road? It's my great delight and privilege and pleasure to curate you through the uniqueness of this structure. And I'm really intrigued to know what you think about it and how you experience it, David. So any questions before we start?
Yeah, no, I think we're good. Let's get right into it.
So there's going to be a clearing or serious happy place of you, David L. Deutsch's choice to get onto in a moment on the open road of this. Then there's going to be a tree, a lovely juicy storytelling exercise called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's going to be some alchemy, some gold, a couple of random squirrels, a cheeky bit of Shakespeare, a golden baton and a cake. So it's absolutely all to play for. So you're taking a swig because it's not a memory test. That was milk, hopefully. Got milk? Was that milk in your cup?
Yeah, no, this was tea. I need the caffeine to go through this.
But you needed the milk to go with it. We both know that. So yes. Let's do this then. So your clearing, first of all, is your serious happy place. Where does David L. Deutsch, copywriter, copy coach, game changer, go to get clutter-free, inspirational, and able to think? Where is your clearing?
I think in terms of just where I love to go, it's any place with a vista, any place with a view, whether that's in the ocean and you can look out onto the horizon, whether it's a lake, whether it's a mountain, looking at mountains, being on top of a mountain, being on top of a high building. There's something very inspiring about seeing more of the totality. It's like that Merlin thing where Merlin educated King Arthur in England when all the tribes were fighting with each other and said, I want to take you something. And he took him above England and he said, what do you see? And King Arthur said, there are no borders. There are no lines like on the map, right? Separating everyone. Said, that's right. And it taught Arthur something about how to look at his country as being without borders and without division. And there's something about being high, seeing an open vista, I think, that really inspires and feeds me in a way that being, inside in a room or being in a forest where you can't see, far away does. So that's kind of what came to me for that one.
And if I may congratulate you for the notion of a world-renowned copywriter taking a world without borders as your vista to then have as your clearing. That's my interpretation of what you just said, and I loved it.
Yeah, well, I think it opens you up to different ways of thinking. It's funny too, and I don't know where I like to do thinking or a clutter-free space, but and I don't know if that's a separate question, but when I heard that part of it, I thought the clutter-free place where I do my best thinking is like on an airplane with my Remarkable, where I can just write and there are no distractions. It's just that kind of what do they call that? Sensory deprivation almost. You can't be interrupted.
And there's a traveling towards the new horizon you're traveling towards if you're doing that on an aircraft.
Yes. And not to go down a rabbit hole, but there is something about motion, whether you're walking and thinking, or I suppose whether you're in an airplane going 600 miles an hour, there is indeed something about a forward motion that kind of triggers your brain.
Absolutely. And it plays beautifully into that Nietzsche quote of the best ideas happen outdoors. For a start, that's very resonant. And cling, that was like
yes, that
did your own version of my bell there.
I was hoping that was ignorable, but
I picked it up, and I think the audience did too. So that's great then. A world without borders is your clearing. I'm now going to arrive, because of my theatre and acting background, with a tree in your clearing. And just to explain, this is a bit Waiting for Godot-esque, a bit deliberately Beckett-y. And I'm going to shake your tree to see which storytelling apples fall out. A recent guest asked me, is your tree the Garden of Eden? And I went, not that I knew of, but actually it does play into all storytelling archetypes. So it's wherever you feel it might be and what it represents. But this is a bit like, how do you like these apples? And I shake your tree, and then shaking the apples is now the beautiful storytelling exercise, which is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where David L. Deutsch, you've had 5 minutes to have thought about 4 things that have shaped you, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention. And when we get to that bit, I'll explain where the squirrels come in. And then the 1 is a quirky or unusual fact about you we couldn't possibly know about you until you tell us. So it's not a memory test. Over to you to interpret the shaking of the canopy of your tree as you see fit.
Okay. So it's 4 things that have shaped me, right? I would say 1 is Eastern philosophy. Just learning about different ways of thinking, more Buddhist, more Zen, thinking differently about reality, thinking about the duality of things, that contrasting things can exist together, thinking about the idea that the world is really not reality, but in a way, our perception of reality. And I think that kind of thinking is a very good counterbalance to Western philosophy, which is very like the world is real and there are things and there's knowledge we could know, which is great stuff, right? There's a lot of great stuff in there, but it needs that kind of counterbalance. And I think that's also helped me a lot, because a lot of creativity is kind of thinking in different ways and thinking more that reality is malleable, being able to hold two things at once, duality. So I credit that with a lot of things. Systems thinking, mind mapping. I'm inherently a very non-visual person, so it really helps me to draw things. When I started drawing things out, when I started mapping things out, when I started using systems thinking in terms of how things connect together in loops, this happens, this happens, this happens. I realized that really so much in the world is not really a cause and effect, but really part of a bigger system, right? If you analyze why something happens at a company, right? It's not, oh, these people aren't doing their jobs. Well, they're not doing their jobs because they're not properly trained and they're not properly motivated, and all these systems don't interact in a way that inspires and motivates these people to do their jobs. So let's look at the whole system of that.
And that was intriguing that you just said that inherently you're not visual. My presumption would have been, as a copywriter, you see everything in pictures and you're able to see the connections in pictures, but you're talking that you prefer the systematic approach rather than the visual approach.
Yes, I need to deliberately activate that part, and I need to do that by drawing on a piece of paper or on my Remarkable, or, deliberately activating, seeing something.
There's that famous story of someone changing the new city logo by drawing it quickly on the back of a napkin.
Mm-hmm.
Then, do you remember this story? And then they spent almost years coming back to the same napkin, and he just had this instinct to immediately do it. And then they researched why that was right, but he was right from the get-go because his instinct was so strong.
Mm-hmm.
And this was someone hugely experienced who used all that experience to bring it to bear to give that moment of spontaneity.
Yes. And I think, I'm leaping ahead a little probably, but that's how I think about writing in a certain way. Is I think people sit down to write and they become labored and they go back to when they were in school and they start writing in that way, rather than, well, what's your instinct? What would you say to someone in person about this product? Right? That's where the writing should come from. That's where the persuasion should come from. So I love that napkin story.
Wonderful. And I'm loving what you're doing so far as well. This is fantastic. So we're still in the shapeage of the canopy of your tree. So take wherever you'd like to go next.
Okay. And then in terms of other things that have shaped me, obviously working at Ogilvy and having a sense of that advertising isn't winning awards. Advertising isn't being clever and doing commercials. You're really proud of how creative they are, right? It's about getting results. It's about selling things. It's about, getting awareness and changing people's minds. And then I think the other thing that has shaped me over the years, as I think about it, is music. Something that I've always kind of done and has just always helped me in terms of having a discipline like that. And also in terms of, I think, pattern recognition, because music is patterns, right? It's patterns of notes. And it's very hard to play music if you don't see the pattern. If you don't see, oh, it's a scale going up. Oh, it's going down in thirds. Oh, look, it's repeating the same pattern. Oh, now it's the pattern inverted, right? Bach just turned it upside down to do it.
And it's the symphony of copywriting as well. That very yes.
And the symphony of A B A B A. What comes first? What comes next? So it's helped me to look at writing in a way, in the same way. Like, what are the patterns? What is the systems? What is the structure?
A symphonic approach to writing. That's lovely. And did you study music to get your appreciation of the inner workings, the system?
I did. Actually, I was a music major in college, and I was all set to go on to graduate school and be a music, I was going to be a music history major because I wasn't a good enough performer to perform. But I'm
imagining you on a piano at this point, but maybe not. What was the instrument you were playing?
Yeah, I am kind of keyboard. And I decided, what? I don't want to just keep going to school and learning. I want to go out in the real life. And And so I kind of turned down a scholarship to go to grad school and instead did some teaching and then wound up at Ogilvy somehow.
And you've just reminded me that a writer is sometimes called a keyboard warrior. So that's all making complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. We might have done the 4 shappages, or is there one more?
No, I think I think we did 4.
Thank you very much. The system is working.
It's working.
Now we're on to 3 things that inspire you, David.
3 things that inspire. I think nature inspires me. Being in nature, being outside. Ideas inspire me. When I see a new idea, when I see a great idea, it inspires me. First I go, I wish I'd thought of that. But then I go, I want to come up with a great idea for this client or this ad or whatever. And, traveling, being in, cities. I grew up in New York City, so I kind of get withdrawal symptoms if I'm out of a big city for too long. So being there, the energy, in the same way nature kind of calms me down and gives me a different kind of energy, then being in a city gives me a more electrical kind of recharge.
Because where are you speaking from today?
Today I'm in North Carolina.
So when were you last in New York? 2 questions. When were you last in New York? And when did you just discover that's a brilliant idea? When was your last thought of that?
Oh, gosh. I was in New York probably a couple of months ago.
Me too, actually. We could have nearly overlapped.
Yeah, we have to let each other know when we're, in different parts of the world. The last time I had a brilliant idea, I don't know. Every idea that I have, I think is brilliant and I love while I'm working on it,
I was also, that was a lovely answer. I meant, when did you last experience, oh, that's a lovely idea, let me help with that copy, or that something you noticed, rather than wonderfully crediting your own brilliant ideas, which I don't doubt you have.
The last, I don't know. I mean, constantly, you see a TV commercial or you see, a book or something. I don't know if I could specifically say, okay, I remember, I'm very bad at, that's why I like this structure. I'm very bad at, what was the last, or, if you say, what's your favorite book? I will suddenly be able to not remember any book that I've ever read in my entire life. So I warn you of that right now. Don't go off script, for God's sake.
For God's sake. Lovely. Next thing that inspires you?
Oh, the next thing that inspires me. Great writing inspires me. When I see a well-turned phrase, or when I see someone that has said something in a particularly succinct way, like when I see someone that has taken the banal, or banal, as we say on this side of the pond, and like Churchill, you read words of Churchill's, like, my God, like, how does he do that? How does he elevate the English language like that?
And just before we started talking of Churchill, I said the word tickety-boo, and you asked me about it, and then I told you that it was something that was a song,
right,
in a song about optimism during World War II, which was, of course, the Churchillian era. Just as a resonance for what we were talking about before.
Yes, and so many great phrases, come from there. What is it? Stay calm and carry on, or something like that, from those
Keep
old.
calm and carry on.
Keep calm and carry on. Right.
Yes, which are bedecking mugs and T-shirts and tea towels across the world to this day.
Right.
So great words and great phrases do last the test of time. That's the other magical thing about really powerful copywriting.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Look at some of the old ads, whether it's they laughed when I sat down at the piano, or at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this Rolls Royce comes from the electric clock. Probably a lot of our expressions come from old ads.
They do. Yes. I'm just enjoying as everyone percolates and tries to remember their own refrains or favorite adverts. There was a very famous one in the UK, which is not particularly profound, but everyone remembers the advert of being a secret lemonade drinker. there's a man by the fridge saying, "I'm a secret lemonade drinker. Our whites, our whites." That's just, and of course it's totally random because our whites nowadays long defunct, but everyone remembers the man by the light of the refrigerator enjoying our whites lemonade.
Oh, wow.
There's a
Wow.
danger that no one knows what I'm talking about at all there, but that's
There is that. Probably no one remembers Where's the Beef from
no. Where's
the
the beef from?
Where's the Beef from Wendy's. When they were trying to say we have a lot of meat in our hamburgers, they kind of put down the competition by this old woman was going into like a McDonald's or the competition, and she'd look at the hamburger and it was just this little round silver dollar of beef, and she'd go, "Where's the beef?" And that became kind of a catchphrase.
As
and
we're
it-
on, sorry.
I was going to say, and a politician actually used that years later. He was in a debate with Ronald Reagan or something like that, and maybe it was Ronald Reagan himself. And his opponent said something, and and the guy said, "I don't understand what he's complaining about here. Where's the beef?"
Fantastic.
And it was just that became memorable all over again and repopularized.
As you were riffing, it also reminded me, I grew up in Uganda between my being 2.5 and 10, and there was a particular, I think it was an Esso advert where there's a tiger in my tank. And you've just reminded me of, I've just remembered that for the first time randomly.
Yes, that was here for a long time.
I said no rabbit holes for my.
No rabbit hole. Don't you have a bell? You're supposed to ring.
The bell has just gone off. That was a rabbit hole. If you're still with us, this is still, no one should have dozed off because this is a good conversation. That could have been the 3 things that inspire you. Yes?
Yes.
And
probably more.
The system is working. I'm delighted for both.
Working.
Symphony of our structure. Now on to the 2 things that never fail to grab your attention and rather deliciously borrowed from the film Up. Have you seen the film Up, David?
Yes. I think that's the one with the balloons, where the balloons take the house.
Yes, it's the most beautiful, heart-wrenching montage of disappointment at the beginning about a life not quite lived.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst trying to live it, whilst life gets in the way. Anyway, the montage is beautiful, but within it, there is a dog that goes, "Oh, squirrels." And so there are sort of random squirrels. So it's your 2 monsters of distraction. What 2 squirrels, metaphorically, never fail to grab your attention, irrespective of anything else that's going on in your life?
I have to ask you this, though. Is that where that expression, a squirrel went by, for distractibility, is that where that comes from? Or that's where the movie got that from?
Do you know what? I don't know the answer. I suspect my presumption is that that's where the movie got that from.
Yeah.
But whenever you think, squirrels, everyone can relate to that because there's something random to each idiosyncratic human being that stops them in their tracks that may not stop anybody else in their tracks.
Yes. And there's also something wonderfully appropriate as a writer about that image, like of a squirrel going by, because squirrels by their nature kind of dart by.
Yes.
Really quickly and kind of grab your attention like that.
Yes.
In that little peripheral way. So,
and reading between the lines, I'm glad you're enjoying the structure too, which is, I love that. And it's music to my ears, covered in earphones.
I need structure. I'm a very unstructured person by nature. So I always like to be in structure. It's a nice, secure feeling.
Lovely. So let's to your squirrels, sir.
Onto my squirrel. See, I got distracted by squirrels while I was trying to talk about squirrels, which is very appropriate. So that's probably one of the things that distracts me, obviously, is just anything interesting and getting off on a tangent like that. But in thinking about that, anything at the margins, I love that word margins, like the extremes, right? Anything that's the best, anything that's the worst, anything that even like, the tallest building, I want to explore it. I want to read about, even people at their best and people at their worst. That's probably why I'm so fascinated about World War II or the Civil War, because, you can learn a lot about reading about people in ordinary life and how they go through their lives in nice, peaceful times. But you really learn a lot reading about how people go through a Civil War or World War II. And, the stories in there are just so amazing because it is the extremes of hardships, the extremes of challenge. So I think as a writer, as a student of human nature, and just as a curious, if not nosy person. I extremes will always, grab my attention away.
And I love the expression on the margins, of course, because that's where the action is, probably, because it's people in adversity overcoming challenges and obstacles.
Yeah. And it's also, where things are just interesting.
Yes.
Um,
Great squirrel.
Great squirrel. That's one of my favorite squirrels. And maybe this is redundant to what came before, but I think what will always get my attention is just something that's beautifully expressed, or words that just go together, writing that's incredibly heartfelt, beautiful, well expressed, clever. Humor kind of falls into that. That will get my attention, right? Oh, someone just told a joke or something, or this is funny.
Yes. I'm fascinated by sometimes deconstructing a joke to work out why it's funny and without analyzing it too deeply. But I love it when you get the spontaneity of language that surprises you in the form of a joke.
Right. And, there's probably a connection between humor and the margins and extremes, because humor in a way is an extreme.
It's
right?
pushing the boundaries. Yes. Humor. I often say humor pushing the boundaries. Yes.
It's pushing the boundaries, but I think it's also pushing the boundaries in terms of like flipping something.
Yes.
Right. Your expectations, and now it's the opposite of what you were expecting, and it's fun. You laugh. Because
I do a lot of comedy improvisation, and technically that's called a reverse, when you reverse the audience's expectation. I appreciate you probably knew that, but that was just labeling the sort of technique of subverting one's expectations through a brilliant punchline or a reverse of what the audience expect is happening.
Yeah. One day we'll have to talk about my very limited experience doing stand-up and my very limited experience doing improv, which I totally enjoyed and feel like, especially the improv, I feel like it really was great It was great for copywriting.
Yes.
Because copywriting in a way is yes and.
Yes.
Right? It's always like, yes, and, you get this, right? Oh, you feel this way, yes, I empathize and understand. And here's why that means you should buy this product.
That's music to my ears as well, that comedy improvisation also inspires a copywriter. I mean, it's a wonderful underlying mindset. Yes, and yes, and yes, and as you articulated, is a wonderful mindset.
Aren't we always, though, improvising? Right? We're improvising right now. And when we sit down to write, we're improvising. We may be putting it on the page, but we're improvising, what we're saying.
Absolutely. Wonderful squirrels. Congratulations. And can we now have the one which is a quirky or unusual fact about you, copywriter, copy coach, and game changer, David L. Deutsch. What is a quirky fact about you?
Oh God, I've got so many quirky facts. I can juggle, which, is a quirky fact. I can play the didgeridoo a little bit.
Any chance for solo?
Chance of a solo. I think it's back here somewhere, actually. Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me. So those are two things, I think. I tend to like to be able, I'm a good beginner. And so I like doing, I like learning the didgeridoo a little bit. I like learning juggling a little bit. I can't do 10 bowls at once, while I eat an apple, but I can do 3 pretty credibly.
That's good enough for me. That is juggling if you can do 3.
Yes.
I mean, you stand in a corner on your own if you can only manage 2.
That's my trick. It's just to be able to do things well enough to say that I do it.
So rather than that was brilliant, you just get that was juggling. Yeah, well done. So that's really good.
And aren't we juggling right now? We're juggling so many things at once.
And if I may, arrogantly, I think we're doing it majestically. It's lovely. So we have shaken your tree. Now we stay in your clearing, which is beyond margins as we sail or on towards a horizon with no boundaries.
Okay.
Now we're going to talk about alchemy and gold. When you're at purpose and in flow, what are you absolutely happiest doing in what you're here to reveal to the world?
I think, as we talked about earlier, I'm really happiest solving problems, right? You had a problem with your site. You showed it to me. hopefully I was able to solve a little bit of those problems. And
I'd still appreciate some help on that, and I'd love to talk to you about that afterwards.
okay, you got it.
Yeah, on air, I've officially got David Eldridge's help, which is lovely.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. The best way to get my help is to say this problem is unsolvable, or I'm stuck on this, because I think it's just, I like the challenge of that, and I like the thinking that you have to do to solve that. And I think writing, in a way, is ultimately all about solving problems. Whether it's the big problem of how do I position this product, how do I even talk about this, how do I get people's attention, to the problem of, okay, well, I said this, now how do I connect this to the next thing I want to say? And how do I make this interesting now, right?
Yes.
That's a problem.
And presumably that's in the DNA of your being an original ad man, in that how do you add proper got copy to this particular campaign to sell this particular product? And again, congratulations, because you're known as the $1 billion copywriter.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it probably is in my DNA to some extent to just, want to do that. Like if I see something that's badly written, I want to go in and rewrite it. So, or at least, or better yet, tell the person how to rewrite it, and then they can rewrite it.
So you talked about life in the margins. This is you going around with a red pen and sort of scrawling in the margin to correct it. Love that. And now I award you with a cake. Hurrah. So we need to talk briefly about cake. Do you like cake, David L. Deutsch? What does the L stand for? I never did ask you, actually.
Lee.
Oh, not legend, Lee.
Not legend, right? Not EL. Although if someone says, okay, I need you to sign this, David L. Deutsch, and I go, is that EL? So I make that same joke you did earlier on the L. It was funny.
Thank you very much. Here a week, as they say. So what cake would you like if I was to sort of send you one? What's your cake of choice?
Well, I do have to tell you about cake, that even though I love cake, it doesn't love me unless it's gluten-free and dairy-free and sugar-free.
So got milk doesn't apply. It's got to be dairy.
Yeah, I have to get my cake from someone that makes it for me, or either a friend or a baker that will make me a cake to those specifications.
In my just talking about cake or sweet treats, in my Legacy Life Reflections endeavor, I have struck upon the idea, because it accesses stories that are precious to us. It's made me think of having, well, I offer people who want to talk about it the choice of 3 sweets that your nana or granddad or your mum or your dad might have most enjoyed. And in the UK, there are very iconic boiled sweets. One's called a Werther's Original, another one is a Devon Toffee, and then another one is a Mint Humbug, tapping into ye olde sweetie shoppy terrain. So if I may ask you, just while I'm riffing on this, if I was to offer you a sort of ye olde sweetie shoppy iconic sweet of old, what would you most like if you don't want a cake?
I don't tend to like fancy toffee, things like that. I tend to like, a plain piece of chocolate, or a plain piece of, white chocolate, or, cake with vanilla icing or something like that.
The Milky Bar Kid, was that one of your campaigns? Was that in America as well? Because I think it was an American kid with the Milky Bar Kid is strong and tough. Do you remember?
No, I don't know that we had that here. The
well,
Milky Bar Kid. They had Snickers for a while, where it was kind of like you're mean when you're hungry, and they would give people Snickers bar, and they would go back to being themselves.
So the Milky Bar Kid was strong and tough. The Milky Bar Kid was whatever the rest of that rhyme was. But anyway, sorry, I've gone down my own rabbit hole. Anyway, so I can't furnish you with a bold sweet of choice either. You want dark chocolate?
Yes.
Or Milky Bar?
Yes.
Or milk or white chocolate? So that's just to get me onto the last suffused with storytelling metaphor about cake. So you now get to put a cherry on the cake, gluten-free, dairy-free, made for you.
Yeah. I hate cherries on cakes, by the way. I don't know why people put cherries on things and put them in drinks and put them on cakes. But
you don't like that, or you?
I don't. But I appreciate the metaphor.
Thank you.
I mean, cake is a great metaphor too. It's like, let them eat cake, or you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like people relate to cake. So
Another affirmation of the system working. Thank you.
Yeah.
So now you get to put a cherry on the cake with stuff like,
Okay.
what's a favorite inspirational quote, David, that's always given you succor and pulled you towards your future?
I don't know if it's a one that has always given me succor and pulled me toward my future, but there's a quote from Charlie Munger, who you may know. He was kind of the brains behind Berkshire Hathaway with Warren Buffett, and he said something that I've always loved. It is remarkable how much long-term advantage can be had by trying to be constantly not stupid instead of being very intelligent. And I love that because I think a lot of what I teach about creativity is helping people find the obvious, right? Or at least what is obvious in retrospect. And sometimes, like, for instance, that's the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Because the intelligent thing is, to do what everyone else is doing and try to do it better and improve upon it and be intelligent about it. And when in reality, it's just, well, why not just do something completely different? Why not, instead of doing a regular soft drink, why not do something called Red Bull and make it the opposite of drinks? Make it not taste good. Make it, really expensive. Make it in a little bitty can, no caffeine. No, we're going to fill it with caffeine. Right? We're going to fill no sugar. We're going to fill it with sugar, and
Was it your idea?
in retrospect, that's very obvious, right? Yeah. So it's like, don't be stupid. Don't do what everyone else is doing. And I think sometimes we, and myself included, just try to outsmart ourselves. And I think that's especially true in writing, where people become very, well, let me remember all the things I learned about writing and the formulas, and I need to begin with a startling fact, and I need to, and they just forget the very obvious fact of that you're just trying to persuade someone, and you're just trying to persuade them the same way you would persuade them sitting across the table from you. So don't be stupid. Don't get away from that. Do the obvious thing and just say what you would say to me if you were sitting across the table from me.
And could we deliberately reincorporate the quote, because it was such a wonderful one that I think, and it's multi-layered. So can we hear it again?
It is remarkable how much long-term advantage you can have by trying to be consistently not stupid instead of very intelligent.
Thank you. Lovely quote, and beautifully unpacked and explained before you reincorporated it. Lovely. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, obviously by somebody else, do you think?
The best piece of life that I've ever been given.
Advice.
It's advice that I keep needing to remind myself of, which is, hard now means easy later. And it's something that I constantly forget and have to keep coming back to, because one of the things about always being distracted and being a little ADD or a lot ADD is that, that you put a great value on the now. And so I want to make the now easy, and I want to do what I want now, forgetting that if I make the now a little more difficult and do something I might not want to do now, the future will be much, brighter and easier.
It plays into no pain, no gain as well, although that's a slightly different construct, but similar.
Yes. It's a little more an extreme version of it, and frames it as pain, because I think the cool thing is that a lot of times you find that what is hard or what seems like it's going to be painful turns out to be not hard and not painful.
And made your life better for it. Yes.
Yeah. Which is kind of like brings us back to the first thing I talked about, which is the whole Eastern thing of we create reality, right? We create the idea that it's going to be hard or it's going to be painful.
Which reminds me also of that beautiful quote from Hamlet: nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yes. Well said. Well said, Will.
Will, he knew his onions. He really did.
He knew his onions. I love the way you English have all these little expressions that are just a little bit different from us. It's almost like there's this country, and it's like it's a country, and it's just like America, except, and you think that it is, but then you go there and it's like everything is a little bit different. The names of stores are a little bit different. The gas stations have different kinds of names. And then people say things a little bit differently.
And of course, the gas stations are called petrol stations.
And they're petrol stations, right. And the car has trucks or lorries and,
Next question.
Yeah.
With the gift of hindsight, you've spent the last 4 decades making sure companies get copy. With the gift of hindsight, what notes, help, or advice might you proffer to a younger version of yourself, David L. Deutsch?
I would say that the things that you think matter now won't matter years from now. And some of the things that you think don't matter will matter years from now. Whether that's taking care of your health or whether that's, doing what you want to do or, going out on a limb in some way. I think that, as you get older, you realize the finiteness of life. It's very hard to realize that when you're 20. So I think it's that really. It's, don't be so sure that what matters. Don't be so sure that what you think doesn't matter.
I love the sort of double, triple negative positive in that. That's great.
Really. Yeah. And also invest in Microsoft and NVIDIA and, other companies, please.
We all wish we had, or maybe some of you have, who knows. We're ramping up to talk about Shakespeare finally, but just before we get there, this is something called pass the golden baton, please. Another English expression, they don't like it out by Mr. Mannering, which is a quote from a TV program, which you probably don't know, called Dad's Army. So that could be a stupid reference. But who would you most like to pass the golden baton along to now you've experienced this from within in order to keep the golden thread of the storytelling going?
I think you should have on, there's a designer and marketing strategist, Lori Haller. We've worked together on projects. We work for some of the same clients. She comes from the design end of things. So she takes, she is able to use the visual aspect brilliantly to get people to stay on the page, to read, and just has a very nice way of speaking about design, speaking about the customer journey, speaking about a lot of things that go well beyond, copywriting.
Lori Haller, you said, is that right?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that wonderful gift of a golden.
You are welcome.
And now, just before we get on to the Shakespeare, which we'll come on to at the end, I'm going to deliberately segue the bit in now, which is show us your QR code, please. So the first one is if we want to join you on LinkedIn, this is the most obvious one to go down first of all. So that's that one there. Our lovely assistant, Courtney, is now showing up a QR code. So this is Copywriter, Copy Coach, Game Changer. Scan the QR code. But if you want to say anything about where you are on LinkedIn, David, and that will point the audience to it.
You mean, what is my LinkedIn address?
No, just what can we find out about you on LinkedIn? And you may well be watching us on LinkedIn in any case, but in which case you're there already. But if someone's just listening but not able to QR code, what can they discover about David L. Deutsch on LinkedIn?
Well, there's a lot of posts about copywriting and about thinking and about creativity. A lot of posts that people seem to like about books to read, that copywriters should read, or people that want to write persuasive sales copy should read, that don't have to do ostensibly with copy. Because I think that's how you become a much better copywriter, is learning about persuasion, or learning about, well, how do lawyers argue cases, right? One of my favorite books is by Jerry Spence. And it's about how he wins cases in court. And in a way, that's what we do. We are arguing. We are trying to prove things beyond a shadow of a doubt. We are trying to convince a jury of our peers to buy something.
Lovely. And speaking of writing, that was a deliberate segue. So talking about speaking of writing, just talk us through this QR code. This is the second. Show us your QR code, please.
Speaking of writing is my website, where you can get some free stuff about copywriting and about coming up with ideas. You can contact me there. You can find out about the products that I offer, which is one of them is about generating ideas. One of them is about copywriting, A-list copywriting secrets. Idea Power is the one about generating ideas. And both those things you can get free. Both those trainings you can get free if you join my group coaching. And that's a way, or you can get individual coaching. And yeah, so just
perfect. And Copywriting from A to Z is one of your publications, as is the A-list Copywriting Secrets. And forgive me if I'm repeating something you've just said, but that's where you can get a whole archive of your previous writings.
Yeah. Well, A-list Copywriting Secrets is the training. The Copywriting from A to Z is a free report you can get at that site, as is How to Come Up with Ideas, I think, is the other free report that's offered there.
Lovely. Thank you indeed, Courtney, for flashing up the QR code. And now back to Shakespeare. Borrow from Shakespeare's All the World's a Stage and All the Men and Women Merely Players to talk about the 7 ages of man. When all is said and done, David L. Deutsch, how would you most like to be remembered?
I think just I did some good. I helped some people. I helped some people with their lives, with their businesses. And, elicited response in one way or another, whether that was for people buying things or for people getting interested in things or inspiring people to discover things for themselves, read books they wouldn't have read, think thoughts they wouldn't have thought, otherwise.
Lovely.
Probably not as the $1 billion copywriter, but
But that's a nice sort of.
It's a nice appellation, yes.
Nice appellation to have. Thank you. I was fishing for the word appellation.
I thought I'd help you there. Yes.
That was perfect timing. Wonderful. It was going so well until I just reached the edge of my personality and couldn't speak anymore. Thank you very much. As this has been your moment in the sunshine in the Good Listening To show, Stories of Distinction and Genius, is there anything else you'd like to say, David L. Deutsch?
No, as a mentor of mine once said after an interview, I think when he was asked the same question, I think I've already said much more than I know.
Lovely.
But I've always liked that. No, I would just say, stop thinking of, being a writer, stop thinking of writing, and just think about how you would talk to people, how you would persuade people. How you would, face to face, what you would say about something. Just find your inner writer. Don't write from ideas that you have. A lot of times people's writing is the echo of everything that they've heard before. And we've somehow managed to go through this whole thing and not even mention AI, but AI compounds that, right? AI is an amalgamation of everything that has kind of gone before. And it doesn't have that ability to sit in front of someone and talk to someone, or envision what it would be like to sit in front of someone and talk to someone and see their reactions and hear their objections and just intuitively know, oh, this is going to create resistance or this is going to lower resistance. So, find that in yourself and write from there.
Lovely final comment. And I actually really love the fact we haven't necessarily mentioned all things AI. This is about being human, warm and connecting, which is the whole raison d'etre of what the Good Listening To show it continues to be up to, actually.
Mm-hmm.
If I may just make a couple of announcements before we go. I've got a T-shirt which has a wonderful statement, "What's your story?" on it. And this is very, very exciting because I'm just about next week, as I record today, to be exhibiting at an exhibition in England, Entrepreneurs Convention, part of the Entrepreneurs Circle. And I'm on an exhibition stand talking about a very exciting series strand to the Good Listening To show, which is called Legacy Life Reflections, which is to record your story or the story of somebody really precious to you for posterity. And very interestingly, in the backstory, the story behind the story, my own father, Colin Grimes, has become a very enigmatic mascot for Legacy Life Reflections. 5 years ago, I recorded my dad as the first ever willing guinea pig for Legacy Life Reflections. I recorded him in the halcyon days of his 80s before he slipped into a crater of declining health, which I now know with the gift of hindsight. My dad, Colin Grimes, died a year ago, but now I still have the recording that I have of him, both in filmic form and as a podcast in the storytelling platform of thegoodlistening2show.com. I can't tell you how precious it is. So yes, Legacy Life Reflections is out there to help you and those that are precious to you too, if you'd like to look it up. So that's legacylifereflections.com. If you've enjoyed the show and you'd like a conversation about guesting too, as we broadcast on LinkedIn, across YouTube, Facebook, all usual social media channels, Chris Grimes is me. Just get in touch. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And Courtney may well also be able to flash up that QR code too. So that's a final announcement from me. I've been Chris Grimes. This has been David L. Deutsch, the legendary David L. Deutsch, the billion-dollar copywriter, as you said, but that's not necessarily how you want to be remembered. And because we had your wonderful answer to legacy and how you'd like to be remembered. So now I've raffled on for a bit. Anything else you'd like to say finally? I'd like you to sort of close the show.
Yeah, no, I think this has been great. I wanted to add, when you were talking about the legacy thing, which I think is such an interesting thing to help people leave a legacy for other people. But I think also the interesting thing about that is maybe how it helps the people that do it, because to reflect on one's own life and to realize what one has accomplished, what one has learned, is such a valuable thing. So I would think that would be a great thing to do, even if there wasn't something to pass on. Just the exercise, as it were, of doing that, just the experience of doing that must be a wonderful thing.
That's very generous feedback. Hence, what's your story? Meaning, what's your story? But also, it could be your own personal story, because there's meant to be a catharsis in intention. And I've been told that what's been curated here, this is just what other people have said. It's an oasis of kindness, and it's like having a day spa for your brain. So it does give people the opportunity to go to places they weren't expecting with the structure that the Good Listening To Show is all about. Thank you, David. It's been an absolute delight and a privilege, and I sincerely hope we can meet in person someday. It would be very exciting to overlap when we can be in the same city together.
Oh, my pleasure. And I would love to do that.
And I'd love to be in touch to find out what other nudges of help, advice, and wisdom you might proffer towards Legacy Life Reflections, because it's a very exciting new cut and thrust that I'm on the lip of making this sort of explode into something much bigger, which is really exciting.
Yeah, no, I look forward to that.
And also big mention, of course, to Cassie Quinton, who is one of your copywriting disciples, who's been very helpful in not least introducing us, but also thank you, Cassie, for everything that you did in terms of, giving me some preparation to make sure that I did David some service in how I've described what you're up to, David. So thank you very much indeed. I've been Chris Grimes.